and welcome to the Global Leadership Podcast, where leaders of all sorts are looking for ways to expand their influence in healthy and holistic ways. I'm Whitney Putnam, the host of Season 8 here at the Global Leadership Podcast, and we have a ton of new interviews coming in a few weeks, and we are fresh off the Global Leadership Summit, where we got to learn from some incredible leadership experts. We got to hear from Coach K and how he shared with us about value-based teams and how they always succeed. We got to hear from Kendra Hall and the power of storytelling. We got to hear from Will Gadara and unreasonable hospitality and how that allows others to feel seen and valued, not only impacting individuals, but organizations. It was an incredible summit. And today I actually get to bring this podcast community, our podcast community, into a really, really fun conversation with none other than David Ashcraft, GLN's CEO and president. And here's what's really fun is this conversation with me and David was right after he walked off the summit stage. So you are getting him fresh through what he's thinking about. I just feel like joy is literally coming out of him as he really and truly has shown how much he loves learning and growing as a leader. If you don't know David, David is a pastor, has been a pastor for 32 years. He served as a pastor at LCBC in a church in Pennsylvania. And under David's leadership, LCBC grew from one location with a weekly attendance of 150 people to 19 locations across the state of Pennsylvania, serving over 22,000 people. David did an incredible job hosting the summit. And then, like I said, he took a seat with us to share exactly what he is learning and where he wants to go in the next year. Before we head into that conversation, please like, rate, and subscribe to the podcast. It's a way that your friends and others get to hear great leadership content. So we are so grateful when you do that. Let's go on in and jump into my conversation with David Ashcraft. David, hey.
Hello, Whitney.
You just came off the summit.
Yes.
You just walked off the stage of the summit.
Yes.
Great. We just want to unpack. I want to hear what you loved about it, what you enjoyed about it, what you're thinking about. How do I want to start implementing? So we're just going to kind of dive in and ask a few questions.
Sounds good. I'm good. Let's go.
Okay, let's go. So one thing I think it's fun to hear. I mean, people see what happened on the stage, and you have this really unique experience that you get to see what happens behind the stage with a lot of our leaders, which is really, really great conversations. Is there anything that happened over the past 48-ish hours? Just a conversation, you bumped into somebody, a really neat behind the scenes moment that felt really special for you?
You know, so for me personally, Whitney, last year was my first year, and I was still just kind of figuring things out. And so just trying real hard not to do anything stupid. It's like, let's just not mess this thing up was my goal last year. This year, that's still pretty much my goal, was let's not do anything to mess it up. But having had opportunity to speak to the speakers in advance, so we do a session with them on Zoom calls, one-on-one. And so having had an hour with each of them totally changed everything. Because then when I would meet the speakers, I felt like I already knew them. They felt like they knew me a little bit. And so it was just real special from that standpoint. And all of them loved being here. It was just fun to listen to their excitement of being here. Will Gadara, I think in his talk, said that, and he mentioned all the different ones, speaking opportunities he has, and he tells his dad what opportunities he has. And then he said when he said to his dad that the GLN was going to be an opportunity for him, his dad was just elated to have that experience. So it's fun to hear those kind of things. Probably for me personally would be talking with Johnny. Got to spend a lot of time with Johnny, and she is just so humble. And I can't even imagine just what she goes through just to survive every day. And so even coming in here to the summit, she said, you know, if I'm going to come in the morning, then that means I'm going to have to, it's about a 3-hour process to get her up and ready and dressed. That's before you even get out of the house. And then all the effort that it takes to get her in a vehicle here. And so, but the fact that she perseveres, and, you know, my knee hurts or something, and I'm questioning, do I need to go in today, and all these different things. So it just, I can't even fathom what she goes through. And I appreciated in her conversation, she did say the first 3 or 4 years after she was hurt, she wanted and tried numerous times to take her life. And she said because she was such an invalid, she couldn't even take her life. And so you think, man, you know, that we see her now and you think, what a remarkable person. But there was a 3 or 4 year period that was very dark for her. And to see God bring her through that and her come through that and just have the impact, it's just amazing. So lots and lots of cool conversations like that.
Yeah, and we got to honor her, and you got to honor her. What did it feel like to get to honor her for that kind of a legacy? Like, how did that feel for you?
So, I mean, what we were doing is really just saying, Johnny, we would call her a legacy leader and somebody that, because we'll have a lot of leaders, Whitney, that'll come through on the platform, and we're impressed with them in the moment, and they'll have great things to say. But who knows, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road, what happens? And we all know stories of leaders that flame out and have problems. And so for somebody like Johnny that's been, she said 4.5 decades, so 45 years, leading with integrity and still doing so well, it was just amazing. And so, it was emotional. And even her talk was incredible and just challenging us that, it's in our weakness that we experience God's power and that we have influence. And so just fascinating to listen to her. And so emotional even for me as I'm, trying to present the award from her and watching her husband, Ken, who they've been married 42 years, and school teacher, I think he said for 32 or 34 years, and watching him and thinking even what they have to go through as a couple. And so just fascinating to watch all of that. And she did actually say, Whitney, as she was leaving, she said, this is the last time I'll travel. I won't ever travel again.
Say that.
And so, because I was saying what's next, and she said, it's my last time. But so she was just so honored to be here. But I kept saying, we're the ones that are honored.
That's right.
So,
David, just to hear her talk about weakness and how she's not doing the leadership, she has become the leadership. I mean, it's who she's become. Really
and Whitney, so we do a podcast with her, and she would quote Bible passages that you and I know, and
I know it if I look it up.
Yes. And so the fact she has them from memory. But I guess what I would say is we know we've read them, you know them, you know what they're supposed to say. She's living what they say. And so it's just, she's in a different atmosphere than I am anyway. So.
I love it so much. And I'm really, I love that you got to have that moment with her too. Just like what a beautiful honor.
Yeah, definitely something I'll remember for sure.
Yeah. I love that. David, one thing I know about working with you is that you've been coming to the summit for how many years again? Is it over 20?
30, yeah.
Over
so
30.
If this is our 31st, then 31. So
there you go.
Yeah.
So, and one of the big things that you love about it is you bring teams.
Yes.
And then you get to have you get to have common language. I know you do this with Ruth, your wife, too, which I think is so amazing. Like this translates into our marriages, into our friendships, into who we work with. So is there something that you're already noticing like, oh man, I really can't wait to share with my team kind of this thought or this concept or some kind of common leadership language that you're already thinking about to move into your leadership?
Boy, I don't know that I've gone that far, but what I would tell you, Whitney, is, and one of my challenges as we kind of wrapped up was don't come back next year alone.
That's right.
And I've gone to so many conferences early in my life and role as a pastor, and I'd come back, and whether it be without Ruth going or without the team going, and they just wait for everything to wear off after a couple of days, and they know a week or two you'll be done and you'll be fine, and so they just need to ride it out. Whereas if you go as a team, it doesn't wear off, and you can come back, and to your point, there is a common language. You share this common experience. I find it very true, though, with Ruth, and by having Ruth here with me, even though she was never on our staff at the church, but she knew what I had experienced, and so she knew how I was changing and evolving, and if she were not a part of those experiences, I would change and evolve, and either leaving her behind or ahead, whichever way you look at it, but she wouldn't be changing the same way I was. And so it just has been so good for us to experience it together and for the team as well. As far as things that I hope our team would take away, perseverance is, we never plan themes for the summit, but themes always seem to come out.
Top for sure.
And so perseverance definitely seemed to come to the top, though. The second day, just the whole emphasis on love and how we treat people, and what does that even mean to love your neighbor as yourself, and so
and love your enemies came up too.
Love your enemies, yes, exactly. So it'll be interesting to see as we kind of keep going through it, what are the themes and what are the main takeaways, but just a lot of cool themes that way.
Yeah, I definitely felt like that you saw it in Will's talk, you saw it with Marcus, just this like moving away from transactional to how do we really notice people, which that is Jesus. That's Jesus' leadership. And so I loved that too, the perseverance. And I felt like weakness and failure came up quite a bit too.
Yes, definitely.
Moving through that, past that. Was there anything, so you said, David, you get to spend time with the speakers, you get to know them just a little bit. Was there anything that surprised, like, oh, I didn't know that little piece of information that the speaker was going to go in that direction, not that direction necessarily, but a new piece of information that you found fascinating? Was there anything that you felt
You know what
that's
you know what was
new.
actually real fun? Will Guidara, loved his talk, loved his book, and so I had listened to a number of his talks last fall, read his book last fall, but then even just in preparation for this week and doing an interview with him,
Yeah.
Ruth and I listened while we were traveling in the car to his book on audio.
Yeah.
And what jumped out in the book on audio that didn't so much while reading it was just the impact his dad and his mom had on him. I mean, it just hits you in the face over and over. So his dad was actually here with him, and watching them interact, and even him talking in the interview that I had opportunity to do with him, but knowing his dad was sitting right there in front of him. It was just fun to watch their interaction. And I said to his dad, we ought to be having you up here and interviewing you as well. It'd be fascinating
he was a
to hear.
restaurateur too.
He was.
His dad was
exactly.
too. Yeah.
And just the impact that he had on Will, and Will just constantly saying how intentional his dad was, made me feel like I wish I was that intentional with my kids as they were
David,
growing
I have a feeling
up.
that you probably are.
I don't know, but it's just like, oh man. So anyway, it was fun to see that.
That's so neat. I know. And I mean, Will really leaned into, again, like, because Will runs a restaurant.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're in the restaurant business, David, but what did you take from Will that really mattered? You don't run a restaurant, but what
No,
really
but
matters
church
to you
is
from
a
this?
service
organization.
organization. I mean, I think as I look at it, and he talked numerous times about don't give people what you have, give them what they need, what they want, what they're looking for. And I think oftentimes in churches we say, well, here's what we've got, and we kind of throw scripture at people and what we think they need as opposed to where are they starting from. And we all know Jesus started where the people were, but we get that backwards so often. And I know for LCBC, when we first moved to Pennsylvania 33 years ago now, a big piece of what we did, and I think caused a lot of our growth early on, was just Southern hospitality. We were from Texas.
Yeah, you did.
And so we would just be nice to people.
Yeah.
And
Which
that
was probably
I think that was
alarming to some people.
There were a lot of churches that were not being nice to people back
Yes.
then. And so I think the fact that we were nice just kind of...
I'm so glad you and Ruth, well, you and Ruth are really nice, so that was not hard.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah.
Okay, I love that. Yeah, and it's really amazing because Will's story is he went from 50th restaurant to number one.
Number one.
Because of one set intention of becoming unreasonably hospitable.
And his book, it's about hospitality. It's about so much more than that. It's organizational leadership. And so he talks about changing culture. He talks about how to confront. So many things. So it's a textbook on how to do leadership in a fun way. It's
really
presented
is.
in a real fun
Didn't
way.
he call it a selfish pleasure? I loved that. Hospitality is a selfish pleasure, which is why Jesus probably taught it, because you feel really good when you serve other people. And isn't that what we want to be known for?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I love that, David. Okay, so we have now literally 364 days until GLS 25. I know that sounds crazy, but what do you hope for you as a leader? Like when you're rolling into GLS 25, what are you hopeful for from David today to David GLS 25?
Well, I'll go back to Craig's closing comments. And he kind of had three challenges, and I'm not going to remember the first or the third because I didn't choose to stand up on those two as far as what I needed for myself.
Yeah.
The second was just care for people and care for your team. And so it caused me to have to just really evaluate and say, okay, am I sometimes guilty of using people because they happen to be there on the team to accomplish the goals that I'm looking for, or do I really care about the people on the team? And so that's where I stood, and that's where I said, okay, that's something I need to focus on and making sure that I'm treating people. And I think I treat people well, but again, in my mind, am I thinking they're there for my use or use of the organization as opposed to just loving on people? And so that's one that I would hope for this year for me to focus on.
I love that. Okay, well, we'll have that conversation, GLS 25.
Well, and I don't want to tell the staff that because then they'll be judging me as to whether or not they feel like I've improved or not. So,
Well, David, what I do want to say is really and truly, you do care for people.
Oh, well, thank you, Whitney.
Very,
You're
very
kind.
much. It's true. But I always also recognize we always want to be growing as leaders.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I'm very grateful for your leadership and how
Thank
you do
you.
see
Appreciate
people.
that very much.
Thanks for joining us. I'm glad we got
thank
to
you
catch
for the
up.
opportunity. Excited coming out of this summit. Can't wait for next year. We've got a great lineup already for next year, and so excited about that. And I know there's some others that are just on the verge of coming, and so really excited about where we're headed.
And share just one more time, your challenge to everybody this year was to really bring others with you. So just tell us one more time.
I just think don't come alone.
Yeah.
I think it is so much more beneficial for your organization. I think some people come just for their own self-growth, which is wonderful. But if you think you would bring somebody else, at least one, but man, bring your team, And so to think how that just multiplies exponentially because you're not by yourself.
Yeah.
And so I think that would be wise.
I love it. It's a great challenge. Thanks for joining us, David.
Thanks, Whitney. Appreciate it.
You know, one thing that I'm still processing for that conversation with David is when he was talking about Johnny Erickson Tada and her legacy, and how, you know, she's not just reading the Bible and what the Bible has to say, which is her guidebook for life. She's actually living it. And isn't that so compelling for us as leaders to actually be living what we believe? And then I loved when David got really honest with us, and I said, hey, how do you want to change and grow in the coming year? One, I love that he wants to change and grow, and so do I. And that's one thing that we want to see this podcast community get really honest about. We want to change and grow as leaders and never stop learning. And so I love when David said, you know, with Craig's closing remarks, and he had people standing at the summit, David really wants to lean into seeing and valuing those he serves with. And being one that serves alongside David and learning from David under his leadership, I certainly see him seeing others individuals. And I just love that he wants to keep going in that direction. And I wonder what it is for you. I wonder what it is for me, quite honestly. Where do I want to go in the coming year? And I wonder too, you know, David was really public about where he wants to go. Maybe there's someone you want to tell where you want to go, and you guys can go there together and hold one another accountable for the direction that you want to be in a year. Because we know that community is such a valuable component of our leadership development, that's why we created 365. We have a product where you can continue your leadership journey with either a team or on your own. So make sure to go check it out, globalleadership.org. And right now, through September 3rd, you can get up to $100 off. So say yes to your leadership development and keep going in the direction that you feel called to go. Again, we love that you join us. Please like, rate, and subscribe. It means the world to us. And as you go into your days around those that you get to influence, just remember that everyone has influence. So lead where you are.